Today on the Frontline Health podcast.
Which, if you have muscle and your lean body mass is higher, then you're going to have less likelihood of obesity because you're going to be burning fat all the time. And one of those things is we've discovered that muscle is probably the biggest site for glucose disposal. So when you eat your carbs, your muscles are going to help soak up that glucose and help use it for energy. So if you don't have much muscle, that gets stored in your bloodstream a little bit longer, which means you're going to have higher blood sugar, you're going to have higher insulin, which also ultimately leads to a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes down the road.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Frontline Health podcast by Centurion Health, where we share health news, tips, and insights to help you take ownership of your health. My name is Evan Patrick. With me, Troy Duell, founder and CEO of Centurion Health. What if I told you that one of the most powerful predictors of how long you live isn't your cholesterol, your weight, or even your genetics? It's your muscle. Not just how you look, but how much muscle you actually have and how strong it is. Today, we're asking a big question. Is muscle the organ of longevity?
It is a great question and certainly gaining some steam out there. We've known for a while that muscle was certainly an important component in weight loss for years, but longevity studies are actually suggesting it's much more important than just strength and weight loss, which I think is a very, very intriguing topic for sure.
All right, Troy, so let's start with this. Muscle isn't technically an organ like your liver or your heart. So why are people calling it the organ of longevity?
Well, I think it's kind of one of those trick questions because muscle certainly makes up a lot of organs. So your heart is a muscle, your stomach and intestines are muscles. So in this case, though, we're not just talking about those organs that are made of muscles, but instead we're kind of talking about skeletal muscle and how that muscle actually behaves like an organ in a lot of ways because it's not just about moving our bodies, which is what we typically think of, or our strength, but they're also releasing signaling molecules like regulating your blood sugar and impacting inflammation. So when people are saying that it's an organ of longevity, what they really mean is that that muscle is influencing multiple systems in our body, kind of like our cardiovascular system, our immune system, our gut health, and it determines how long and how well you're going to live because it affects so many of those systems by some of the things that it does.
Troy, I grew up thinking that muscle was all about aesthetics and looks and vanity and that kind of thing. I remember growing up being taught that cardiovascular exercise, just walking or jogging is all that you really need to do to maintain optimal health. But even though over the course of my lifetime, we have seen a shift from that way of thinking to really building muscle be more mainstreamed and not just something that's for bodybuilders and models.
For sure, I think people are understanding that your muscle is a great way to survive, not just to look good and say which way to the beach. So, great opportunity for us all to really start to dive into this longevity piece when it comes to muscles.
All right, so let's start diving into some specific aspects of this. So let's talk about metabolism. What does that have to do with this?
Yeah, so metabolism, I think, goes back to what we originally thought, which if you have muscle and your lean body mass is higher, then you're going to have less likelihood of obesity because you're going to be burning fat all the time. And one of those things is we've discovered that muscle is probably the biggest site for glucose disposal. So when you eat your carbs, your muscles are going to help soak up that glucose and help use it for energy. So if you don't have much muscle, that gets stored in your bloodstream a little bit longer, which means you're going to have higher blood sugar, you're going to have higher insulin, which also ultimately leads to a higher risk of developing type 2 diabetes down the road.
So let me make sure I'm getting this straight. You're saying that more muscle mass means better blood sugar control.
Absolutely, especially when you're talking about over time, because chronic high blood sugar is tied to that heart disease, to certain cancers, and cognitive decline, along with what we already know of diabetes and obesity. So, the more muscle you have, the less likely that you're going to have this chronic high blood sugar, and certainly less likely to have it over time.
Man, that's amazing. Um, Another thing that I've heard people describe muscle as in this conversation is they're describing it as a reserve tank for your body. So what do they mean by that?
Yeah, I think ultimately what they're talking about is muscle is where amino acids are stored. So your protein that your body is able to use and draw from during stress. So if you get sick, if you get injured, or let's say you have to go to a hospital, then your body's able to break down that muscle to help it survive. So that's one of the reasons that muscle is so important because we need that protein and your body breaks it down.
So if you don't have much muscle going into, a hospitalization, an injury, an illness, you're going to be in bigger trouble than if you did have higher muscle mass.
Yeah, I think a lot of the studies are certainly supporting that. And we've got lots of evidence to show that if you have low muscle mass when you go into an area, say you go into the hospital or you get sick, there are significantly worse outcomes when you're talking about recovering from that illness or hospitalization.
All right. So talking about longevity, right? That's the term that we're kind of couching this in. When we look at aging, I have these people that will pop up on my social media feed, and it's like a 70 plus year old man who's got bigger muscles than me as a 28-year-old male, and it makes me feel really bad about myself, to be honest. But shows me I need to step it up. But these guys really look healthy and look like they're able to do a lot of things that most 70-year-olds are not able to do. So this is where things get real. Let's talk about aging. How does that play into this?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're all going to age. We're all going to get older. And what we know is that after about age 30, most people start to lose muscle every decade. So you're never going to be better than you are today. 20 years down the road, you are going to lose muscle unless you really work hard in order to keep that from happening. And you've got to be consistent with your exercise routine. You've got to add in some resistance training to it and understand that it's not, as you get older, it's less about strength and it's really more about building muscle and making sure that you're able to have those daily functions that you can do because that's super, super important the older you get.
Yeah, I mean, making this really practical, people need to be able to think about these things, as they age and to be able to answer the questions, would you be able to get yourself up off the floor if you were to experience of a fall and be injured? Are you able to do those things in your daily life that you want to be independent and able to do as you age, like carrying groceries? Can you prevent a fall, right? Are you able to kind of respond and react if you get tripped up? And people don't realize how big of a deal this actually is and how, something as simple as a fall as you age can really send you down a path of really de-escalating health.
Yeah, I mean, falls are one of the leading causes of death in older adults. So it's a big deal. And the more muscle you have, the easier it is to overcome some of those things. And muscle, along with balance and flexibility, those are keys as we're aging to stay healthy, to stay out of the hospital, and to keep going. And I think the other thing that I really like to touch on is that the more independent we are when it comes to the ability to get up and down stairs, the ability to um, be in stressful situations, which the more muscle you have, the greater likelihood you'll be prepared in a stressful situation. That keeps the emergency personnel, if there was a fire and you're on the top floor, from having to deal with you. They can actually go and deal with people who don't have the ability to get up and down those stairs. So I think it personally is one of those things where it is one of the most selfless things you can do, which is to stay in the best health possible. Because not only do you not take on resources that somebody may need, but you also don't become a burden on those people around you because you're having to wait for somebody else to come help you. And there are plenty of people out there who can't help themselves. So if you have that ability, go out and really work on your health and stay in the best health possible. So you can be someone who contributes as opposed to takes away from society with things like that.
You really make a great point. I mean, yeah, a lot of people would look at working out or fitness as being something that is selfish. But really what you're saying is it's something that not only allows us to not be a burden on others, but it also allows us to help other people and be something that we can steward as a gift that we're using selflessly. And so I really want to just drive that point home because I think it's so true. And I think it's very easy for people to talk themselves out of specific things they know they should be doing for their health, because they think that they're being selfless, and some of that is true, right? I mean, I don't have kids, but there are people who have little kids and they're waking up in the morning and taking care of them. They're putting them to bed at night, but even still, people need to be able to find ways in time to take care of their health so that they can be there for others, and not only be there for your kids, be there for your grandkids, be there for your family for as long as possible. It's really a very selfless thing.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the same thing we hear on every time you get on an airplane. If the oxygen mask comes down, they say to put it on yourself first because you can't help somebody else if you're panicking and you don't have any oxygen. So it's the same principle, and that's hopefully what we're trying to get across to people when we're talking about this particular subject as well.
Yeah, so we've talked about a couple of specific benefits, right? We talked about how muscle helps with metabolic health, how it helps with aging, preventing falls, that kind of thing. But what does the research actually say when it comes to longevity? Is there actual evidence and studies that we point to where we go, yeah, muscle actually is a big indicator of longevity?
Yeah, there's several of them out there. I think some of the ones that we can highlight is we know that higher muscle mass has been associated with lower all-cause mortality for people in studies. We know that grip strength is a strong predictor of lifespan, and that people who have more muscle tend to have better, I mean, go figure, better cardiovascular and metabolic outcomes. So they're going to be healthier overall because they have more muscle mass. And the more muscle mass you have, then the return is going to be exponential when you're talking about your body systems.
Yeah, and that grip strength is a really interesting one. That's super simple. I mean, is this just because people are able to open their own pickle jars, or what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe that's it. They don't drop plates near as often either. So I think that could be a big part of it as well. But I think overall, what they're talking about is if you've got good grip strength, more than likely you're doing something other than just gripping things on a regular basis,
Yeah.
and you're probably working out to make sure that your whole body is in shape, and that helps with your overall muscle function.
Yeah, that's good. Well, for those of you guys who are listening and not watching this on YouTube, Troy and I are both jacked individuals. Troy is actually flexing his muscles right now on camera. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which way to the beach? That's what he's, yeah, that's
exactly. He grew up in
what we always
Florida. He's
ask.
used to strutting on the beach and showing those muscles off. But let's make this practical. So someone's listening and they're going, okay, I'm convinced. Maybe I wasn't a believer in how important muscle, building muscle as I age is for not only my own health but my ability to be there for those around me and to help others. What do they actually need to do, and how can they actually start to build and maintain muscle?
Yeah, I think there are probably three things if we were to get it down to practical pieces. The first is start resistance training. You don't have to be one of those who's asking which way to the beach all the time, so you don't have to be a bodybuilder, but you do need to get in the gym and really push some weights. You don't even have to get in the gym. You can do push-ups, pull-ups. You can lift things around the house, but you need to be doing it about 2 to 4 times per week. And that's a good way to start because you're going to help build those muscles and really start seeing some benefits from having extra muscle built in your body. The second thing would be increase your protein intake because we know muscles are a large portion of protein, and you want to get your protein intake up to about 1 gram per pound of body weight. So go somebody who's much better at math can figure out how many that would be for each individual listening. But if you stick at 1 gram per pound of body weight, that makes it somewhat easier because you can tell how much you weigh. And then ultimately just be consistent with it. So you don't want to do this for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You want to turn it into a lifestyle with the things that you're eating and what you're doing from an exercise routine on a regular basis. Because the longer you can do that and the more resistance training you do, the greater the benefits will be over time.
That's so good, Troy, because that's so simple. A lot of times we really can overcomplicate things when we are talking about building muscle, but it really is that simple. You know, you mentioned resistance training. People can just do body weight things. Another simple thing that I think is great for people is just one piece of equipment, a kettlebell. If you have one kettlebell, you know, you can do squats, you can do rows, you can, I mean, just do all kind of, you can hit every muscle group that you have, and it doesn't take as long as I think people think that it does. Like if you get in 2 to 4 good 15 to 20 minute sessions per week, you can get a lot done in a short amount of time. And so, yeah, I think starting is the hardest part, and just being consistent, and people will be amazed if they really do stick to it at how much better they'll feel, and how much it'll improve their health.
Totally agree. And I don't even think you have to start with a kettlebell. You can get some resistance bands or something
They're
even
good too.
easier because that's ultimately all you're trying to do is just do something, I guess is the key. And we've seen benefit from studies in whatever you do as long as there's some sort of resistance training there.
Absolutely. So, on this note, why don't we clear up a couple of those misconceptions? What are some big misconceptions people have around putting on muscle?
Yeah, I think one of them is I don't want to get bulky. I don't want to be the guy that's out on the beach and can't move his arms or can't scratch his head because his muscles have gotten too big. Well, A, that really isn't that great for you. So we're talking about keeping things in moderation. So that is not where the benefit comes from with those big bulky muscles. But you also have to be super intentional to get to that level, and you have to change your diet in many ways, and you have to change your routine. So, for the most part, people aren't going to get huge like that without having some system to get to that level. So, start your resistance training. Don't worry about becoming the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, and just get it done because that's the key.
I think that's a big one, especially for women who might be hesitant to weight training or strength training. It's not going to happen. Everybody wants to look toned, right? Well, the way that you look toned is you build more muscle and you have less fat, and so
That's right.
you're not going to get to that bodybuilder status unless you really, really, really committed to it. Another one that I think we kind of started with this. People think cardio is enough.
Yeah, I think that's one that most of us have had that misconception when it comes to health. We think that if I'm going to walk or run or do anything like that, we'll lose more weight. The truth is, you don't lose more weight that way. It actually puts a greater strain on your body. While you do need some cardio, we've seen that from a longevity standpoint and from weight loss standpoint, really dealing with this resistance training seems to be the way to go. And it has much greater benefits if you combine the two. And you've got a little bit of cardio with more consistent resistance training. You've got great long-term results with that.
Well, that's awesome. What all of this is getting at is kind of one of the core things, or really probably the core principle of this show that we talk about is taking ownership of your health. And you know, we're talking about building muscle for the sake of your longevity and for the sake of your long-term health. It doesn't happen by accident.
That is for sure. And I think it goes back to everything we've talked about, which is exercise and diet, and becoming a life cycle, a lifestyle that you're trying to pull on every single day. And just start small, start with those little habits by changing something in your diet today and starting one exercise routine today. Maybe it's, 5 push-ups, 5 sit-ups, whatever it is, to start something and then make it consistent. And I think that's the way you start to make changes in your life overall.
So let's land this plane, Troy. The question that we're answering, I think we've answered it. Is muscle the organ of longevity?
I think it's definitely one of the key components when you're talking about longevity. It's not the main driver, but I think it is one of the important drivers when you talk about longevity in and of itself. Absolutely.
Well, there you go, people. We have answered the question. Any other thoughts you want to leave our listeners with today?
No, I think obviously we've talked about it, but just start with some resistance training. Do 1 day a week if that's what it takes, and then get it on the calendar and make it happen. And the sooner you do that, the better off you're going to be.
Awesome. Well, to our listeners, if this episode got you thinking, share it with someone who needs to hear it, especially someone who thinks that strength training just isn't for them. And if you want more practical health insights like this, make sure that you are subscribed to the Frontline Health podcast. Thanks for listening to this episode. Go out and take ownership of your health because you are your best health advocate. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed what you heard today on the podcast, please consider subscribing and leaving us a review. We would love to hear your comments or questions about anything we've talked about on the show. For more health news, tips, and insights, follow us at Centurion Health on Instagram, Facebook, X, and YouTube. And for safe, effective, and affordable healthcare products made in the USA to help you elevate your health and life, visit centurion.health. We look forward to you joining us next time on the Frontline Health Podcast by Centurion.